Hi, and welcome to another episode of Friendship, Wellness, and Wisdom, the podcast where two friends, Rachel and
Heather.
get together and talk about life, learning, and just all kinds of things that pop up in life. And, well, how to navigate all those little twists and turns, being sucked into a little bit of our
Uh,
wackiness and can push past it to get to some of the actual heartfelt good advice. Then we welcome you to like and subscribe and to join us weekly as
yes.
we go through this show. So, if you have
Mm,
something that you would like to see us do or hear us talk about, please feel free to drop it in the comments. We would absolutely love to hear from you.
yes, we would.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather to tell us what we're going to talk about on this week's episode.
Uh, so this week we're kind of changing it up. We've been doing a bunch of, self-care stuff and things like that. So we wanted to change it up this week. And today we're going to embark on a journey of like rich tapestry of folk tales, like all these stories that are passed down through generations and cultures and all this stuff. And a lot of the stories get translated, right? One culture tells it this way, the other culture tells it this way, right? And so we're going to embark on 3 stories each that we each picked. So 6 stories in total. And we're going to talk about the morals of these stories and what we learn from these great enriched stories that are passed down through generations. And so we're going to start off with just getting into telling the story. And then after each story, we're going to give you the moral. And then we would like you to drop in the comments if you think there's a different moral to the story, or if you've heard a story like this in a different way, maybe from a different culture, or maybe your grandparents told you something differently, or like the moral intertwines with another story that you're familiar with.
All right, so let's get cozy. You're going to grab your favorite mug of tea and join us to delve deep into these age old tales, discovering the hidden gems of wisdom nestled within their pages.
Nice. So we are going to start off with a story called The Two Monks. So this is an ancient Asian story. So 2 monks are walking along on their travels, and as they're walking along, they come across a woman that cannot cross a river. The river is high and the water is rapid, and she asks the monks for help. And the young monk says, "We can't help you." And the older monk just scoops her up and walks her across the river. He puts her down on the other side of the river, and then they continue on their journey. The young monk is appalled, and through hours of silence, the young monk can no longer sustain his silence. And he says to the older monk, "How could you ruin our vows of not touching a woman by carrying that woman across the river?" And the older monk says, "I let her down hours ago. You are still carrying
Carrying
her."
her. I love that one. Like, it's just like, oh,
Yes. And so, how many times do we carry things with us that we really need to let go? So, the moral of the story is holding on to anger, resentment, or judgment can weigh us down and much more than a physical burden. Letting go and moving forward with a clear mind and a clear heart is often the wisest path.
absolutely. So I know we've all had things, right, where we get like so wrapped up in what happened and in the stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Yes.
So we talk about like, self talk and how that affects what we think. So we'll be running stories in our heads that, in
Mhm.
some way someone hurt us or we hurt them, or wow, I really shouldn't have done that. That was so embarrassing. And we carry it around for so long. And then you
Right.
end up talking to that other person or like seeing that group of people later. And it's like you've been so worried about like, this embarrassing thing that you said or did or whatever. And no one else even remembers that it
Right.
happened, or they did. They thought it was funny. They made light of it, and it's been done for them for ages. And now
Mhm.
you're like putting yourself through agony and worry, and everyone else is like, yeah, okay, whatever. So
Yes. I know you and I talk about this all the time. We're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And it's like, "What do you have to be sorry about?" It was nothing.
yeah, no, like done. It took me 5 minutes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
next,
It's done. So,
yeah.
awesome.
It's so funny, like a lot of these stories too. I mean, you hear like they're all meant for teaching. Like, so our fairy tales a lot of times come from here. A lot of the stories in like ancient texts, like the Bible, like they
Mhm.
pass these stories down to give you a different perspective on things and to kind of like change your view, like to teach a moral, to teach a lesson.
Mhm.
And there's something like really deep within. The best part of these two, I think, is while they have most of them have a specific lesson that they want to teach, there's a lot of different things that you could take away from them and within our unique perspectives on them.
Right. Right.
It kind of changes from person to person, like really what you take away from the story and how you apply it within your own life and your own patterns.
Right.
So I picked a story called Two Little Mice. And this has been like, this is a story that we were discussing, like, we've heard told in different ways using like different animals or different
Yes.
situations
Yep.
to bring it about. So, I was looking through articles to find stories like to help me gather. And the one that I found, um, again, it's the Two Little Mice, and the moral is about perseverance. And they bring up the movie Catch Me If You Can, which is basically, no, it's been years since I've seen this movie. And I think the beginning is like Christopher Walken is playing the character like as an older version. And I think it's Leonardo DiCaprio who plays like the younger character, like all these other people. Like he pretends
Right.
to be a doctor. He takes on all these different personas, and he's being pursued by the FBI throughout the movie. So he tells this story. In the beginning, he's receives a high honor at the local Rotary Club. And he tells the story at the beginning of his speech. And it's two little mice fell into a bucket of cream. The first mouse quickly gave up and he drowned. He just was like, all right, there's no way out of here. And he just gives up. The second mouse wouldn't quit. He struggled so hard that eventually he churned the cream into butter and crawled out. So the moral of the story is basically it's not over until it's over. So like and that's like true in so many aspects of life, right? So you give up here and that ends everything completely for
Mhm.
everything. But what if you keep trying? Like what if?
Right.
And so many times, we do that and we churn our cream into butter
Mhm.
and we climb right out of what we're in just because like maybe even it shouldn't have worked. Somehow miraculously something happens and because we didn't give up, we're able to succeed.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, perseverance is awesome. Resilience, right?
it really is because sometimes we think we failed and we
Yeah.
really like there's nowhere else for us to go. And there's just that one little glimmer of hope, that one last like ditch effort that not only like keeps you kicking like
Yeah.
and going, but it brings you now all these new opportunities because
Mhm.
you didn't give up and things you never saw possible are now
Right.
in front of you.
Right. So, my next one is The Boy and the Calf. Once there was a young boy who was tasked to carry a calf every day. As he grew older, the calf grew into a cow. Yet the man still carried it effortlessly. When asked how he managed to carry such a heavy load, he replied, I never stopped carrying the calf. The moral of this story is pretty much just like consistency and just perseverance to challenges, right? You just kind of start off little and little things become bigger things. We deal with this like when we are trying to either like gain muscle or work out or whatever, right? People want this like instant gratification of whatever. And the fact of the matter is, if you're consistent, everything is consistent and steady. These little things that we do become huge changes in our lives, and it's effortlessly because you are doing it in small increments. So it's not even like you're disrupting your whole life. We talk about this on our show all the time,
Yeah,
on how, just take the changes, just whatever you can fit into a day. And then those changes grow to big changes, right? Those little
absolutely.
changes.
You just have to be willing, really, I guess with this one, like it's kind of like, yeah, patience and persistence.
Mhm.
Because, you start small, but like you're growing in strength, you're growing in
Mhm.
stamina, like you're growing in endurance. And it's pretty amazing, like what you can do over time
Right.
with those small little steps. So,
Yes.
so now this one's a little bit longer, and it's called Saint George in Retirement, and it's about obsession, and it's a variation of the legend of Saint George and the Dragon. So basically, what ends up happening is after many centuries of hopelessness and superstition, Saint George, in the guise of rationality, so, this is him coming to this great rational realization in the world, somewhere shows up in the world around the 16th century. And the first dragons that he was fighting off were metaphorical dragons, of course, are dystopic kingship and religious intolerance. So, right, so kings oppressing the people, religion is oppressing
Mhm.
people. So basically, everything that we're going to come into contact here are people being repressed in one way or the other. Just to kind of sum that up a little bit, because this story runs like a little long. So after he slays his dragons, he starts to like rest and retire, but then notices like all these new ways to keep people down, right? All these other ways people are being repressed in the world. And he just keeps fighting one battle after another, after another, after another, trying to literally put out all the injustice in the world by himself. Like
Mhm.
one guy, one sword fighting every battle. And no matter how tired he gets, like it's never ending. So um, then he starts fighting smaller and smaller dragons and trying to like take it down little by little to like eradicate all the oppression in the world. And basically the moral of the story is not knowing when to quit
Mhm.
can really drive you crazy,
Yeah.
because when you keep looking for something, when you keep looking for another battle to fight, when you keep looking for, you're always going to find what you're looking for,
Mhm.
right? So it's never going to end. Every time you look for the smallest bit of something somewhere, you're going to find it, and then your battle's never going to end. And it can really be maddening when you just don't know when to stop.
So this story, I've heard this story in different different ways, several different ways. And the reality is, the thing that I took out of the version that I had heard was that um he was only willing to do it himself. Like
He wouldn't pass it, right?
he wouldn't allow others to help him either. And
Yes.
so that's the other piece of it too. Like, not only if you're fighting the battles alone, the battles are endless, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, looking for the next battle and also not taking help from other people can be just
Yeah,
just
basically, like you should be passing the torch, pass the
right,
baton, look for, new insights, new ways of doing
right,
things, because he's literally just slashing at things with a sword like
right.
he was with the original dragons, and that's just not going to work
Yeah, it's that
anymore.
the definition of insanity.
Insanity, yeah, doing the
Yes,
same thing over and over again and expecting a
expecting
different result.
right.
So,
So we're going to move on to my next one is called Good, Bad, Who Knows? Once there was a farmer who lived on a small village. One day, his only horse ran away. Upon hearing the news, the neighbors came to console him. They said, "What terrible luck! You've lost your only horse." A few days later, the farmer's horse returned, bringing him a herd of wild horses. Now the farmer had not only his original horse, but also many more. When the neighbors saw, they exclaimed, "What wonderful luck! You've gained so many horses." Again, the farmer replied, "Good, bad, who knows?" The farmer's son decided that he was going to tame the wild horses, but he was thrown off a horse and broke his leg. The neighbors came and said, "How unfortunate. Your son broke his leg." Yet the farmer responded with the same refrain, "Good, bad, who knows?" Not long after, a war broke out in the region, and the young man was drafted to fight. But because he had broken his leg, he was not able to go. The neighbor realized the significance of the farmers, and they came and said to him again, "You were right, neighbor. We thought your bad luck turns into good fortune." And again, once again, the farmer replies, "Good, bad, who knows?" So the moral of the story is that life's events often are unpredictable. And so when we make the first judgment of like something that happens, so when something happens and we automatically judge it as bad, if we give it time and kind of let things resonate with us a little bit more, good things do come out of things. It's kind of, all of these stories kind of connect too, because like when you
Yes.
look at the mice falling into the cream, what a misfortune, right?
Right.
But the one mouse not giving up, right, turned it into butter and was very fortunate that he got out. And
Hmm.
so, these things are, things could always be bad, right? Things could always be worse.
Well,
Things could
yeah, and I
always
think we've
good,
always
and
had
they could always be better.
we've had things in our lives, like all of us, that have happened, and at first glance, we think it's like either good or bad, and then something further happens to
Yes.
to kind of change what it is. And I literally had like quick personal story, very quick. I had a tree fall on my house at one point, and there was a hole in my roof. So you think, oh, that sucks, right? But the hole was hit in such a way, like on the part of the roof where nothing was actually coming into my house from outside.
Right.
So I was able to get someone to come out right away to fix it. Homeowners insurance covered it, cut us the check. Someone came out,
Hmm.
gave an estimate, cut us the check, and then the actual work ended up costing less
Oh,
than the check we had gotten. So it
yeah.
was good and it was bad all
Yeah.
at the same time. Like,
Right.
so good things happen, bad things happen. Some things worked out for the better,
Yep.
some for the worse. But like either way, in the end, it kind of ended up neutral because it was like a slight inconvenience with a payoff at the end.
Right. Yep.
So
I think we all have those stories.
I think so too. It's just a
Yeah,
matter of how we see them, right?
it's our perspective of them for sure. Me and my husband lost our home, and in looking for another home, right, we wound up renting from a man who sold the home that we were renting. And so instead of, renting, we wound up being able to purchase a home. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have
So
had that
you just,
opportunity if we didn't lose the original place we were living in.
yeah.
So, all
It's
right.
pretty funny how things show up like that, and it's,
Yeah,
to just, like, be able to, kind of sustain judgment
right.
and just kind of accept things for how they are. It really, it's like, "Wow, okay."
Yeah, and perspective is everything, right? If you could put a good perspective on things, which brings us to your next story, because your next story is
Yeah, all about perspective and, objectivity, right?
Yep,
So, this next story is The Blind Men and the Elephant. I actually really like this story.
I do too.
It just kind of makes me chuckle. Some of these too, like, are almost like a long form, like, jokes. Like they're like somewhat humorous. Like
Mhm.
they kind of, even with the two monks, right? It's like it's almost like a punchline at the
Yeah.
end, the way that it hits you. So I love that. All right, so this is an Indian parable about objectivity. So there's a group of blind men that heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought into town, but none of them were aware of the shape and the form. So, out of curiosity, they said, we must inspect and know by touch of which we are capable. So, they sought out and they go to look for this elephant to touch it to see what it feels like so that they can understand the shape of the elephant. So, the first man, he landed at the trunk, said, oh, this is like yeah, this is like a large snake. Now, the other one reached for the ear. It seemed like a kind of a fan. Another man whose hand was on the leg said the elephant was like a pillar or a tree trunk. The man who placed his hand upon the side of the elephant said it felt like a wall. Another one who felt the tail described it as a rope. The last felt the tusk and felt like it was smooth, like a spear or a dagger. So they all found different aspects of this one animal and described it in completely different ways. So, really, like the same experience to different people
Right.
is almost like a completely different experience. They all went, they all saw this one animal, and they all saw or felt different aspects of this one creature and described it completely differently. So it's like, my view of something, the same exact thing will be completely different
Right.
than yours might be. And that's you know, that's pretty interesting, like how we see the world as we are
Right.
and not as it is.
Yes. It's kind of cool because you and somebody else could go through the same exact thing and use a trauma, right? But you both can react to the trauma differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we, even though we are experiencing sometimes the same exact things, we're not taking out the same lesson,
No,
right? We're not
absolutely. And
taking out the same
yeah.
perspective. And that's what's beautiful about like all these stories and technically the world, because even though we are the same as in, structure, blood, bones, whatever, we are so different on how our mind perceives things. We talk about how we grew up helps us navigate through life, the life lessons that we get, puts new tools in our tool bag to deal with things. So yeah, so these stories are like that, which is beautiful. So as we close our episode today, we reflect on the power of storytelling throughout history. From ancient fables to modern parables, stories have always served as a mirror of reflection in life's truths and guides us towards growth and understanding.
Very true. Very true. So like I love these stories, like, and I get very fascinated with like all the different stories that come from different
Hmm.
cultures. And it's really funny how similar all of these lessons are.
Hmm.
Like, they come from, all across the globe from cultures that are vastly different, but like the life lessons and the morals and what we take and what people are seeing in the world,
Right.
that at that time seemed so far apart and so different. It's a lot different now. Everything's closer with technology, but things that you think are so different and so vast, like they're the same life lessons, they're the same
Hmm.
stories, they're the same things about, learning about yourself, other people in your environment. And it's just amazing
Yeah,
to see the
totally.
subtle differences and the large similarities between all of these stories, which
Right.
is that's the part I find fascinating about all
Right.
this. It's like the details, the small details are what is different, but the bigger picture that it shows is so similar
Right.
and so common,
Right.
which,
Which are great life lessons, right?
yeah,
It's like those golden
absolutely.
rules, the golden rules of life. And so when you look at the different cultures that tell the stories, like I said in the beginning, if you have any of these stories that are like resonate with you and you're like, oh, I know the two mice as this story, or I know the boy that carried the calf as this story, we would love to hear it. So drop it in the comments.
All right. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll be back again next week. So make sure to pop back in and give us a listen. And like I said, please share what you're thinking with us. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, and anything you may like to hear in the future. But for now, we will say goodbye and until next time.
Bye.